What's going on, everyone? Anthony from Chronometer Check here, and today we're going to be reviewing and taking a look at possibly one of the best dive watches that you can get for around $1,000. This is the Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro 600. Let's get into it. I mean, very quite possibly one of the best unboxing experiences I've had, especially within a $1,000 watch. Absolutely phenomenal. Quick disclaimer, this watch was sent to me by Christopher Ward for review. On loan, we'll be sending this back. Regardless, will not affect my review whatsoever. With that said, not to start off the video by shilling, but oh man, look at that. I mean, this is a watch that the second that I looked at it, it did feel much more expensive than the $1,000 price tag would suggest. So, quick overview, since there are quite a few different Christopher Ward models. This is the Trident Pro C60 40 millimeters. This includes a fully lume bezel, an impressive 600 meters of water resistance. This is the 40 millimeter variation with the Selita 200-1 movement, sapphire crystal, and ceramic bezel. It also includes X1-Grade Superlumina, which we will get into a little bit more later in this review. This model in particular also comes on a bracelet with a quick release and quick adjust clasp, again, one we will dig into a little bit more. So taking a look at the dial and some of the finer details that really make this watch kind of pop are really refined elements, such as on the applied hour markers here. We do see on the sides of the hour markers themselves, they are brushed, but towards the center they are polished, which really helps it to catch light and really make it seem like a very luxurious type of watch. This is sort of embellished throughout the handset, which is rather unique. We do see this sort of broad hour hand and a second hand with the signature Christopher Ward Trident, denoting the Trident models. And again, those hands are finished equally to the hour markers in the sense that they are both polished and brushed, allowing them to catch light and reflect beautifully. Both are filled with this exquisite X1-Grade Superlumina, which is sort of a teal blue-green. It's very, very bright, and of course this is accentuated by sort of how broad and thick the applied lume is throughout the hands and the hour markers, but in general, really, really good lume. Lasts throughout a night, 8 hours, and is quite nice, and also reflective on the ceramic bezel insert itself on the markers. We do see a glossy dial that is almost as glossy as the ceramic bezel insert itself, and again, this sort of like leans into the very luxurious, almost dress dive watch element, how beautiful this thing is when it does catch light, and it's not hard to do. You know, this thing is just, it basically wants to catch light at every single angle, and it's just absolutely beautiful because of it. Quick interruption for some shopkeeping. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if this is your first time here. Thanks for watching. Getting back into it, we could see that this blue dial variant is absolutely brilliant. It is a relatively brilliant blue, ironically, no pun intended, that is a little bit on the lighter side, a little bit more on the rich side, as opposed to a deep, dark navy. And I think it does that very, very well. They do have a black model as well as a couple of other color variants, but I think this blue is absolutely stunning. So now getting into some of the finer details of the dial in terms of logo, design, etc. We have at 12 o'clock the new Christopher Ward flag logo, which some may like, some may dislike, but regardless, it is done rather originally. As you can see, it is quite subtle in the sense that it is almost etched on and almost disappears under certain lighting conditions. Now, we do have the Christopher Ward text at 9 o'clock. Some seem to really dislike online the fact that it is just a man's name on your wrist, but really, if that's what you're worried about, then this isn't the watch for you. But regardless, more specifically talking about the placement of these different logos and such, I am a little bit concerned with sort of the asymmetry of how this is designed. Of course, we do have that flag logo at 12 o'clock, but with the Christopher Ward text at 9, and then the automatic you know, all the water resistance information at 6 o'clock. I feel like it is a little bit off balance with then this dark date wheels. We have 2 light elements over here, and we have 2 dark elements over here, and it just seems to be a little bit asymmetrical to me, and throws off the balance just a bit. With that said, you might be one who kind of enjoys this little bit of variation on the typical, you know, dive watch design, where typically you'll have a logo at 12 o'clock, you'll have a date at, or date at 3, and then at 6 you'll have all of the water resistance information, maybe a bit about the movement, and then usually at 9 o'clock there's really not too much over there, so it is a little bit of a spin on the typical design. Speaking of spin, we give this bezel insert a spin, and oh man, this thing is buttery smooth. The sound is absolutely fantastic. The machining is possibly one of the best well-machined dive bezels I've felt, up there with like Omega Seamasters. It's absolutely phenomenal. It sounds great. There's absolutely no backplay. It's so well precision that it's just perfect. 120 clicks, unidirectional, and the very precise engraved ceramic bezel really makes it legible and very easy to sort of set and read the bezel itself. Now, taking a look at some of the other elements, including the watch case itself, we do see a signed crown at 3 o'clock, which is signed with the Christopher Ward Flags logo. It is very, very deep-toothed in the sense that it's very engraved deeply, which allows you to get a very nice handle on the crown itself when hand winding or setting the time. It is a screw down crown that screws in nicely into the crown guards of the case, which we will get into in just a second. Now, speaking of the case, this is where things really start to diverge and get interesting. You know, from a top down, it kind of almost just looks like any other dive watch when talking about the case in particular. But when we look at the sides of the case and when we really look at the watch from different angles, we really could see where Christopher Ward sort of upped their game and really added some detail. Both the top and the sides of the case are brushed. However, they are sandwiching a very, very thin polished chamfer, which then runs to the crown guard over here. It forms a very, very slight crown guard and then slopes downward towards the case back itself in a very, very pleasing way. Now, on your wrist, this does make it wear a little bit sleeker, a little bit slimmer than other slightly more chunky tool dive watches, and I think this is sort of a running trend with this watch and something that they were going for, in the sense that this isn't just meant to be, you know, a tool dive watch. This is almost, you know, I'm not going to put it up there with the Rolex Submariner, you know, because that kind of is the pinnacle of sort of like luxury dress tool watches. But this is a dive watch that's definitely on the dressier side, and it does that very, very well. Now you can see here how the watch kind of slopes downward toward the case in a very sleek and elegant way, and it's just absolutely phenomenal how they've been able to do that. Taking a look at the case back, we do have the Christopher Ward Trident once again, etched very well, along with the model Trident Pro 600 denoting the water resistance. Yes, this does have an impressive 600 meters of water resistance, aka 2,000 feet. Pretty phenomenal for the price. It does also have these little etchings, which I believe are to help a watchmaker or yourself even get a very, very nice and easy grip so as not to damage the case back when using a case back opener. However, it might also be to sort of absorb and sort of create a little bit of an air channel for sweat and, you know, water if you are wearing this, like diving, for instance. I'm not quite 100% sure on that, but that is my speculation. Now, another element of the Christopher Ward C60 that really helps to kind of complete the package, if you will, is this bracelet here that is quite unique and is executed very, very well. Now, one thing you'll notice is that it does have male end links from the bracelet itself, so it does make it wear a little bit larger than its lug-to-lug on paper would suggest. We'll get into dimensions in just a second, but it tapers down nicely to 18 millimeters from 22 millimeters, as is the lug width. Rather substantial bracelet with quick release on the inside, of course solid end links, and a very substantial signed Christopher Ward deployment buckle. Now, this buckle is machined extremely well with a smooth finish, smoothed it out, and it has no rough edges at all. It's clicked securely into place and releases very easily. So the advantage of having a quick adjust bracelet, which is very, very similar to sort of a glide lock style bracelet clasp, is throughout the day your wrist might swell up, it might shrink depending on if you're getting hot or cold, etc., and your wrist is going to change size throughout the day. It's not going to stay one size, and of course the size that you set the watch to might not, you know, initially might not fit you on later on in the day. So to account for this, this glide lock is extremely helpful. Now we could see the mechanisms in action here. In order to operate it, you could simply slide this end of the bracelet towards the clasp. Now you don't need to press down the actual micro adjust in order to do this. You could simply just take it and then slide it in. In order to release it, you will need to hit this tab while sliding this out. Now it's going to be a bit hard to show on camera, but But that's it. Essentially, you just take this little adjustment tab, you slide it over, and then you pull the bracelet out. Very, very functional and not something that I really expected to see on a $1,000 watch. Now, speaking of bracelet, how well does it wear? We're going to throw it on the wrist and show you exactly that. Quick wrist check. Today I am wearing my Casio AE 1200, aka the Casio World Time. It's a watch that I tend to gravitate to in sort of transition periods of weather, you know, spring and fall generally, because it is so lightweight and comfortable. It might not be something I'm going to wear, you know, in the middle of summer, where I might, you know, sort of reach for more like dive watches and stuff like that. But it's a watch that whenever I just want something light and comfortable on the wrist, no matter the weather, this watch really, really pulls through. And, you know, it's probably one of the cheapest watches I own, if not the cheapest. I think it comes in at around $20. We'll put the link in the description, but it's just a fun little watch to have. And it's also really cool to have the quartz in the collection to use as a reference when setting the time on another watch that is mechanical that I'll pick up and grab, as opposed to using my phone. It just gives me a little bit more attachment to my watches, you know, when setting the time. So giving you a quick on the wrist here, as we can see, this is a 40mm dive watch that fits rather well on my 7-inch wrist. You know, this is a rather small 40mm, or rather wears relatively small because of the rather minimal difference between the bezel and the case from a top down. And then also, as stated before, from the side, the watch case sort of slopes down. It sort of gives a very sleek and low profile appearance, and it just looks very sleek, very slim, very elegant. Dimension wise, 40mm in diameter, 47 lug to lug. It is accentuated just a bit, again, by the mail and links on the bracelet itself. So it does wear like it has a lug to lug slightly larger than that, but not too much so. Not so much that it's like clownish on the wrist or anything. And generally it feels very comfortable and balanced on the wrist. It comes in at about 161 grams, including the bracelet, so definitely not a super heavy watch, about average for a watch with a bracelet. A couple of other details specs wise, this watch does have a sapphire crystal with a bit of anti-reflective coating, which I think is super necessary considering how glossy the dial is, in a good way, but without that it would be absolutely unreadable. And I think that's one of the things that really, you know, helps to give the feeling of a much more premium watch, you know, having that crystal not be reflective and not get in the way of enjoying such a beautifully glossy dial. And the movement that is housed inside this watch is a Selita SW200-1, which is essentially a 26 jewel clone of the Swiss 2824 entry-level workhorse, which is a very reliable and well-known movement. It does have a very smooth sweep of 28,800 beats per hour, absolutely gorgeous, and generally solid accuracy and reliability. Its specs on paper denotes that it comes in typically between -20 and +20 seconds per day. However, on average, most people tend to find these movements run a little bit more accurate than that, generally within the ±4 seconds range, which is very solid. So ultimately, I love that this is a very well executed, dressy diver watch that is not just a dive style watch in its appearance, but it obviously has the screw down crown. It has the 600 meters of water resistance. You know, this is a serious dive watch, but in a very modern package. Now, there aren't a ton of options out there when considering the $1,000 price point for a dive watch this good, but there are a couple of variations in different price points that you might want to be considering if you are considering this as your next purchase. For example, the Oris 65, which contains the same movement. However, they often only contain 100 meters of water resistance, which obviously doesn't compare. And it's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit less substantial feeling than the Christopher Ward C60 is. So you're not going to get as robust of a piece. However, those do tend to be a little bit more vintage inspired. Now, there is also the Oris Aquis, which is a little bit more of the modern stylish interpretation, a little bit more similar to the Christopher Ward in that regard. However, they do tend to be quite a bit pricier. The more recent Tissot Seastar 1000 does come in under $1,000. However, I would say it's not quite as well refined as the Christopher Ward. You know, the finishing is nice and does have features like a ceramic bezel insert and a sapphire crystal. However, it's just simply not up to snuff with such a high level of refinement as the C60. Steinhart, now this is a micro brand out of Germany that does a Steinhart Ocean 1, which is essentially a very, very close homage to the Rolex Submariner. Some people may dislike that it's such a close homage to the Submariner, and you know, the Christopher Ward is a much more original piece, so it gets points there. But the Steinhart Ocean 1 generally comes in around $500, also features a Swiss ETA 2824 movement, very, very nice build quality, and also has, you know, the ceramic bezel insert, sapphire crystal, the things that kind of make the Christopher Ward look a little bit dressy. However, it doesn't feature any of the originality that the Christopher Ward does. Now, Seiko actually has a quite nice option in the SPB 143, which is a re-edition of their previous 65 Mas in a lot of ways. Now, it is a very modern looking watch. However, it doesn't have features like a ceramic bezel insert. Instead, it has an aluminum bezel, and overall, it just looks a lot more of a tool watch than the Christopher Ward, which in a lot of ways almost looks like a beautiful piece of jewelry as much as it does a watch. And finally, the Raymond Weil Freelancer Diver generally comes in around 1,000 USD also, but it's only available in 42 millimeters, whereas the Christopher Ward comes in as 38, 40, or 42. So you have quite a few more options. And also the Raymond Weil does have a little bit of a weird date wheel, which may not appeal to some. And over here, we just got a nice little simple, you know, it's just a nice little simple. You don't need to overcomplicate date wheel right there. So overall, who is this watch for? I think for someone who wants the feeling of a luxury dive watch, who either really likes the styles that Christopher Ward puts out, or you're just saving up for something a little more expensive in the meanwhile, this is a fantastic piece that can either hold you over or hold its own in a collection of more luxury watches as well. This is definitely a piece that stands out from the crowd in its refinement, its attention to detail, and it seems that Christopher Ward is quite dedicated in refining this piece over time, and they continue to improve on this piece through multiple iterations, this being the third. Now for 1,050 USD, I think this is an absolute steal. Thank you again, Christopher Ward, for sending this out for review. And thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if this is your first time here for more videos in the future. Let me know what you think about this piece down below.